It is Kevin Kline from Good Maps, who will be talking about this navigation tool and how it works to assist and create travel independence for people who are blind and visually impaired. So I will turn it just right over to Kevin and let him talk about himself and the company and where navigation technology is going. So Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to your talk.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you all, having me today, and I'll kind of do a little background about myself, and then ramble about Good Maps a little bit, and then hopefully we can have some good conversation at the end, answer any questions, and have any good thoughts about what we've talked about. So, a little background on myself. I am based out of Nashville, Tennessee. I actually lost my vision roughly 7 years ago, over the course of 6 months. So I haven't always been a blind traveler or I'm still not a blind pro, if you will. I'm still learning day to day, but I was able to navigate my way into a role at Good Maps. And so I did that about going on 3 years ago now. And they had asked me, in the process of the interviews, are you willing to travel? And I said yes, and that was a lie. At the very beginning, I was not willing to travel, but I wanted to get back into the workforce after losing my vision. Try to do my best to make a living for myself and help other people along the way. So as I continued, with Good Maps, I started that first year. I did a lot of work strictly, with other users like myself, blind and low vision and other abilities. I'm still, in the community engagement role, but I also, float between sales, community engagement, marketing, really any of the video marketing, things like that, and just kind of wear a lot of hats, but in the best way possible because I didn't always know, what kind of career or job I wanted, even when I had perfect vision. So being able to, lose my vision and then find a job I love was kind of backwards to me, but it was perfect. So I now, I am now the blind guy at all the airport conferences, which is very interesting. One blind person out of 500 people or 1,000 people is very interesting. I've made a lot of good friends that way, but it's really helped show, what I'm doing there, why Good Maps is at the airport conferences now and the rail stations and all types of others. But before I get into all that, we'll talk about what Good Maps even is, what I'm talking about, what it does, where we started. So back in about 2019, the American Printing House for the Blind out of Louisville, Kentucky, I'd say most of you all have heard it, but one of the world's largest braille distributors is our parent company. They had a vision of making, indoor spaces in general just more accessible for blind and low vision users. And so that was way back in the day. We started with beacons for a year and then got rid of beacons. And, the whole goal was to just let people be independent and have a little more freedom in really any indoor space that could make sense for the public. And so as we continued, we grew and grew our technology. I say we, it wasn't me, it was the people behind the scenes that know what they're doing with the application. But what we've done is really make it from making more indoor spaces accessible for blind and low vision to let's make a navigation and mapping platform for everyone. So, as someone who had sight, I still didn't know where things were in a large airport when I had sight. So, making sure that it's accessible for people like, myself and a lot of the people on this call first as a base has really helped us grow in the last 2 years. That, I'll get into the growth that we've had, but, being able to go from, a vision of accessibility for blind and low vision into using beacons into no beacons at all. And then now in the last 2 years, we've had, the creation of just the Good Maps application. So we are now one app for the accessibility instead. I think at one point we had three, which was extremely confusing. We wanted to make sure we could tie it all in together. So what we do is we have navigation through the application for the accessibility side of things. And then we have a web map as well for the general public. We provide editing platforms for those venues. So construction or a museum changes exhibits, they can switch that in seconds. So what the application looks like is it's of course fully compatible for iOS and Android devices. I'd say about 90 to 95% of smartphones. We're looking at the smartphones you might get from the grocery store that are pay as you go, the camera just may not be up to date, or the app store that we need. But the majority, I've seen it work on, iPhone 7s or iPhone 6. So it is still very possible for older devices as well. But we have true turn-by-turn direction. So it's got your position between 25 and 30 centimeters of accuracy. So it knows where you're going off your phone's camera. The way we're doing that is we've came in and we did what's called a LiDAR scan of the building, and your phone camera is basically comparing what it sees to that scan to get your exact position. So there's no Bluetooth needed or beacons for the venue, things like that. And so we've got the turn-by-turn directions to get you wherever you want to go in that space. I'm just going to use an airport as an example today because that's where we've been growing the most recently. But you can go anywhere, whether that is, your gate, of course, but restrooms, if you want to use a kiosk, any ticketing office, water bottle filling station, Uber pickup zones. I know, for instance, here in Nashville, just the terminal building has 600 points of interest you can go to. And, we can add all types of information to that. But, it shows, anybody with sight would, anywhere they would want to go, I want to go as well, or have the ability to do so if I decide to. So that's
For
kind of what our goal has been with that.
for a point of interest, like a bathroom, let's just say, so
Yes,
it
yes.
finds a bathroom, but does it also have you also scanned the inside of the bathroom? So if I'm trying to find a stall versus a sink versus a
So yeah, so we don't do the indoor sides of restrooms, for a few different reasons. One, the security, but two, a lot of people, especially in a busy place, would not find it great if someone is waving their phone in a restroom. But what we have done is add description fields for each of our destinations. So this is up to the venue to put this in, but they can put, I know Nashville has used it for all their restaurants. So their menus are on there, the hours for ticketing offices. You can also add the details for a restroom in that. So
okay.
say, you navigated to the accessible or family restroom, and you just want to know, is the sink on the right or left side or right in front of me, or things like that. So those minor details that are huge for us, we could add into the detail field for the point of interest. So yes and no on the restrooms, if you will. So
And
yeah,
and one other question, as you said, waving your phone around, um, is there any connection now with the third party allowing into things like the meta glasses to have it go through that camera so that you can be hands-free? Because as the blind
yeah,
person with the cane and then carrying my dragging my luggage behind me, I suddenly don't have a hand free to be holding the
definitely,
camera.
definitely. So one thing I will say is that's my number one question I've had to our CTO every time I see him. But I will say we are working towards that. There's been a lot of things that needed to change. One with the glasses, but two for us to work with the glasses because we're not connecting a camera to another individual. I'm an Ira user, things like that, but we're not. We're doing kind of a little bit more in detail, but less on the camera side of things. So it's only using that camera to get your initial position. So the deal with that is we have augmented reality arrows as well. We have, a few different things. We want to make sure the battery is good enough to last for multiple routes, things like that. But I do know that we have worked with a Meta grant, so that is in the process. So I will say sooner than later, hopefully. And that is something that has been on our roadmap. I've been able to go with our CTO to see Sun out in Anaheim, NFB, a couple other conferences, and he's been able to see the need for that. And I think now that the SDK for Meta, Ray-Bans, and their other glasses has opened up, it's made it a little bit easier to start that conversation. So it is on the roadmap, and I have a little more optimism than I did a year ago. We'll say that. And I, as somebody who travels every week to at least one airport, some with good maps, some without. I definitely understand the need for that hands-free and cannot wait for that day to come. We'll say that to be frank, but yeah, so that's on our roadmap, and it will be in the future. I cannot tell you a time frame on that. There's a few different things that need to be done in the background to make it compatible though for that. So as I kind of mentioned those augmented reality arrows. So the app, we have the turn-by-turn directions that'll get you through. You don't have to hold your phone up the whole time. It needs to get your initial position. And say you're on a route that's, 500 feet. It might ask you once in the middle of that 500 feet route to raise your phone just to confirm where you are, but that's not even every single route. So it may not do that at all. It may, because it uses the sensors in your phone as well as that initial position to know where you're going. So being able to have those sensors plus that initial position to get your 30 centimeters or less, position, and then get you to wherever you want to go within 1 meter 100% of the time. So, I've unfortunately done this a few times, but it's a whole lot better now. I don't have to guess if I'm going to the right restroom or if I'm going to the right gate or, things like that. The confidence I have now than I did without using good maps is, enormous. So we've got the turn-by-turn directions, and we have augmented reality and the text directions for those who might be, neurodiverse or deaf individuals. And then we have step-free routing as well. So the step-free routing, imagine you're getting off your flight at Logan and you're going down the baggage claim. So you may have, mobility challenges. You might have someone in a wheelchair, a baby stroller, luggage, may just not feel like taking the stairs or escalators. That will take them to the best elevator or easiest on their route and avoid all stairs and escalators if you select that. And then all of this is translated into 27 different languages. So if you're already, if your phone is set to Mandarin or Spanish or Canadian French, it automatically translates the map itself online, the application that's accessible, and those audio directions that I'm hearing as well to blind individuals. So that's been a true game changer because about 2 years ago we had 3 languages. So, being able to grow those up to 27 and counting. We're doing a lot of work with cities for the World Cup, and we've done, the Paris Olympics. So that international reach, especially with our airports, is, crucial. So that's been a big upgrade in the last year or two. We also have a feature that has came back from our original app in the last 6 to 8 months called Look Around. And Look Around is probably, as a blind individual and blind user, is one of my favorite features. So it virtually will give me eyes for a little bit, if you will. So it's going to announce everything that someone with vision would see around when it comes to the points of interest. So if I'm walking through, B&A here in Nashville, and I'm just curious, I've never been here before, if I've got a 2-hour layover, things like that, it's going to, I can either walk with the phone and it'll announce when I'm passing, what I'm approaching. It might say party foul hot chicken 5 feet to my right, or it might say Shake Shack 20 feet ahead, men's restroom 20 feet to your left. Things of that nature. And as you turn as well, so you can stand still and say you're at your gate and you just wanted to know what is nearby. What can I walk to in a quick manner? That's going to be able to, go to 360 and announce everything that it's facing at that moment. And then from there, if you hear, Starbucks, you really need a coffee. You could lower your phone, select that point of interest from Look Around, and get the turn-by-turn direction straight from that screen. So being able to hear it, that it's there, select it, quick walking directions in a matter of just a couple seconds. So that's been a really cool feature. I can only imagine how that's going to be once we have any, partnership with the Ray-Ban glasses. So
let me ask you this question on that look around, and you picked Starbucks and you're sitting at your gate at some chair. Are the turn by turns like sensitive enough to turn by turn you around the other chairs that are in the waiting area? Or is it?
Yeah, so if it is a structure, so I get asked this a lot by, say new airport partners, things like that. The obstacle side of things. So say in an airport, there's a row of, 10 chairs right there. We are going to have routes in that middle of the section of the chairs. So it will, if you're sitting down, it's going to say turn right or left. It's not going to run you straight into another chair, if that makes sense. Now, if someone wheels out a rolly desk chair into the middle or a trash can or wet floor sign that's not supposed to be there, that's going to be picked up by the cane or guide dog or other mobility device. But yeah, we'll have routes basically anywhere that is mapped out. and any structure like a row of chairs that is, there at the gate that is always there. And when they move those, the airport reports that to us so we can do drawings of the new routes. So we always want to make sure that and we try to do that as well in the middle of the terminal. So, you have a bunch of airports have a lot of random things in the middle of the terminals, right? So we want to make sure that we're, having the most clear path without any, obstruction in the middle as possible. That's one difference, with good maps is that we do not like you don't have to have an anchor point of any sort. Anywhere that is mapped out. So if I get dropped off, here in Nashville in the middle of the parking garage, like, say by the elevators or in random Uber zone that I'm not normally at, it doesn't matter as long as it has been mapped out on that property, I can get my position and go. So virtually we map out from gate to curb to car. So if you're, beginning of parking lots, here in Nashville, there's probably 30 to 40 Uber pickup zones. Each one is on our map. So I can go from, gate C23 to Uber zone B2, in one route. Now that route is, 20 minutes because it's just so far to walk to an Uber these days, but it is, very much something I can do independently now. And we've done that with college campuses, for instance. So building to building navigation, you can go now from a room in one building, search. You just know there's a, cafeteria somewhere on that campus. You search cafe, it'll go to the connected map section, take you straight to that cafe, through the outdoor walkways, through the front doors of the building you didn't even know it was in, to the cafe. And so we're able to now do the whole property as a map, if you will. And, we, of course, when it comes to like crosswalks at airports, things like that, we announce that you're approaching a crosswalk, use caution. We know that that's when the mobility skills come in. Things like that, you listen to traffic, all that good stuff. We do the same thing with rail stations. So we work with over 100 rail stations, probably 100 in the UK. We've got Seattle, all of their rail stations. We have the PATH stations now in New York, New Jersey. And we are, putting those announcements up for safety that you're approaching, where the rail system is. We make sure that announcement comes way before it should, to make sure that there's a little bit of safety awareness there. But one thing I want to always make sure is that we are not, trying to be a safety device or anything like that. We always, we work very closely with O&Ms throughout, our launch events, things like that, our testings, making sure that, people are still, using, I know majority of individuals still use a cane and things, but I want to make sure that that is their device. Picture us as a Google or an Apple Maps when someone is driving their vehicle. They know how to drive that car and they're going to use their skills, but that still doesn't help them drive to New York City from Boston. They still need the directions, right? Just make sure they're, going the right direction where they want to go in the best way possible. So that's what we're trying to do for indoor spaces and outdoor walkways, things like that. So what we do is, from the application that you can open it up after this call and explore all of our buildings. So from the homepage, once you download it, it'll say you're not near a building, which is, true more than likely. And so you're going to explore all buildings and it's going to be listed from closest to farthest away. And that's going to have a very random variety in the best way possible of buildings. So, as a smaller startup team, we can only, go so fast, but we are at our max right now with what we're doing. We're, signing as much as possible, launching as quickly as possible, things like that. But you're going to see, if you're in Massachusetts, you're going to see a couple buildings probably on Perkins campus. You're going to see the YMCA in Cape Cod. You're going to see a library in Chelmsford, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then you're going to see closest airport, probably Providence, Rhode Island, TF Green for now. Hopefully we're coming into Mass for airport sooner or later, but I'm working on it. But then you're going to see Bradley Airport in Connecticut. You're going to see Otis Elevators in Connecticut, Westchester, Columbia's Teachers College in New York, Manhattan, and then it's going to go all the way through, US, Canada, over to Europe. You're going to see our buildings in Australia, Argentina's airports coming up. So you're going to see buildings as far away as you want. You can scroll and scroll. You could search if if anybody's going, say, to Austin in July. You can search Austin. Oh, that airport is mapped out. I can, navigate it using good maps when I get there. Things like that. Or if you're going to the UK for a week, you can see which rail stations, which is probably the majority there in UK, in London specifically, are mapped out. So you can easily figure out, where you're going if there's any mapped out buildings, if you will. And so we're trying to grow to not just airports. I've talked about that a lot, but that's just a sector that we have focused on in the last year. We've had new colleges come on board, universities, museums, historical centers, government buildings, things like that. We've got, I believe we are about to sign our first NBA arena. I don't want to jinx it, but that is hopefully coming sooner than later. And so we're really just trying to map up, anything larger than a Starbucks, or, anything of any decent size that we might need to know where to go. And so a couple ways that has improved as well is, yes, for the our large spaces, we still need to send out one of our surveyors out of Louisville, Kentucky, and have them go scan the building. But it is now easier for smaller buildings, say 40,000 square foot and below, to have a map even quicker than that, and a little bit cheaper. Not a decent amount cheaper without the travel costs, things like that. So we've had actually our first airport use this tool. It was a two-gate airport out in Yuma, Arizona. They scanned their whole airport, which I think was about 35,000 square foot, with an iPhone Pro, and did not need, no one from our team was on site until the day we launched. And I'll get into what those launches look like, but this has really helped a lot of the smaller buildings, an office building that there's a couple of blind individuals that work at. They just need assistance getting around. And it's not huge, but it's, big enough to where I can get, pretty turned around. So this will help the cost go down, and also the speediness of a launch of a map. So normally our maps take about, 2 months to complete. This might take a little bit less. And so being able to, have someone in the facilities team of that building just scan, and it's from what I've been told, it's very easy to use the scan and go method. And that's been something that has helped us in the last 6 months really bring our technology to a new light. It's not just, hey, we've got to send someone to, California today to scan a building and come back, because that's, double the cost right there, just because of the flights and hotels and things right now. So, it's been very helpful, and can help us, spread the word as blind users and low vision. We also, with that, have an advocate landing page now online that you can help, spread. If you have a contact at a building that you just want them to know about what's going on with Good Maps, you can send that out, and it'll have all the information. You can also share the contacts with me and any of our team, and we can assist on those communications. But what happens when we launch a new building is, I did this with Providence and Bradley and a few others. I've done this now with majority of our new airport partners as well. As we come out, we'll have a good, probably 4 weeks of invites sending out to all the community members, disability organizations, but colleges, universities, the mayor. I've gotten to speak now with a couple of different mayors at these events. We'll have media come out, and I know with Bradley Airport we had I think a record of 6 TV stations, which was a lot, but great coverage. Being able to spread that through the community, let them know, one, that it's available; two, the airport is putting accessibility at the top of their mind; and three, that we can navigate freely and independently for the first time in a long time. And we have been doing that now for the last year or two with these launch events, and really helping. You'll get, if anything comes new in Massachusetts, you'll get emails and phone calls from me more than likely. I am at probably 80 to 90% of these launch events. it's really a great time for me to be able to, interact with people in the community, show them, do demos, things like that, and then let the users go try it out throughout the airport or whatever venue it might be. So we really like to, push that. It's really helped us, I think, really in the last year and a half as we've gone from the beginning of 2025. We had 7 or 8 airports, and we are now at 47 as of last week. And so it's really helped us grow. We've got, I think, over 350 total buildings. We've got, like I said, a good variety of different types of buildings coming as well. And with the FIFA, as I mentioned, we've got now this week, DFW Airport is going live by the end of this week or next for the FIFA games coming up in a week and a half. So that is, of course, our busiest and largest airport that we have coming out. It's 178 gates, I believe, or if not close to it. If you've never been there, it is madness. So I'm extremely happy to have Good Maps coming and being able to be there in a week or two to try it out. And then we've got the World Trade Center Oculus is coming live as well. Very, of course, a historical monument type of deal for me. Knowing that I'm going to be able to go launch that. I think 30 days. They're doing a celebration roughly 30 days before September 11th. Sometime in August, I hope to be in New York to launch that. We've got all 13 Port Authority stations, rail stations in New York, New Jersey coming out, Hoboken, things like that. And we're really just, pushing as much as possible. We've got a small team, so any help from the community is always welcome. If you have any questions on how to do that, I can have Aaron share my contact out. Love having conversations about this, especially as a user, being able to, have firsthand experience, if you will. Like I said, I travel every week, and that's why I was really, excited to hear the questions at the very beginning about, traveling this week for the first time after vision loss. I was like, well, yeah, I definitely understand the hesitation, and because it is scary at first, but being able to know all of your options when going in and out of an airport, um, you know, it's not always going to be good maps, right? So we don't have every airport. We don't have Logan yet, but hopefully sooner than later we will. But there is, people there to assist, and we're never going to be taking their jobs. One thing I want to kind of point on really quick is I was able to speak, I think in November, December, to the Kentucky State Council of the Blind, their state conference. And I spoke, for 30, 40 minutes on Good Maps, and that was, really good because that's our base there is in Louisville, Kentucky. We have our most buildings there. We have 3 airports in Kentucky, things like that. But I was told by 2 different individuals at the end of that conversation that they actually were told about Good Maps through the assistance program at the Louisville airport while they were getting assistance, which was kind of mind blowing to me because a lot of my thoughts at the beginning are these people are going to think we're trying to get rid of their employment, which is not true at all. We just want to provide more independence. So what we've done is worked with a lot of these assistance teams because they majority of airports outsource and contract out to different companies, whether that's G2 or Next or a couple others. We give them these little lanyard cards. I don't know if you all have heard of the Sunflower program, but sometimes they put them next to that. It'll have a 3 or 4 step on what Good Maps is, how to download it. That way, if they are walking with someone and that person is asking, how do I do this a little bit more independently, things like that, they have the option to be able to tell them about Good Maps. So being able to work very closely with these internal parties at the airport, the ones who are assisting us when needed at airports, is very cool to me because I am a avid believer that those people do need to be there for one, and also I think it helps when the last couple of airports I've been able to really help them know how to best interact with blind individuals. I don't know it all by any means, and I'm not a know-it-all for all the blind community, but a little tips and tricks because I think, as mentioned earlier in this, it's not their fault, but they don't always know how to assist us the best. And so, for those who don't want to be in a wheelchair or I've had assistants actually ask me, how best can I help you? And that's the best question I think to teach them how, because each one of us wants a little bit of assistance differently. So I think it's been really great to work with these airports. I know when we started here in Nashville, they really started making everything more accessible. Their menus, their digital website, everything that should have already been accessible, of course, but it kind of gave them a little bit of a fire to do so, and their assistance program, things like that as well. So, I guarantee you that I've missed a couple of things, but I would love to, have a little more conversation, a little more questions, and try and answer those the best of my ability. If you all have any.
Great, Kevin. Thank you. So let me ask you this question. I'll just kick it off. You talked about launch events and having people kind of try it out on a launch day with the camera crews and all that. As a accessibility trainer, technology trainer, not necessarily an O&M trainer, there are people who will come and say, "Hey, I've heard about Voice Vista or Blind Square, and can you help walk me through that app and tell me what these things mean and how they're practically used when I'm actually using the app?" So, I'll help educate people on those different applications, but I'm able to do that because I'm well versed, use those myself, so I know how to tell people, how to use those.
Definitely.
Does Good Maps ever do anything where it's like, hey, let me get a group of people who, like myself, who might want to teach people how to use Good Maps, to take us to Bradley Airport and, walk us through how it works and, how the different, um, icons on the application are used and put into effect, almost like a trainer for trainers type of situation. Is there any opportunity to, you know, do
It's
live
definitely.
demos like that?
So I will say, I guess not officially, but a lot of the events, we'll of course have some blind individuals, some deaf individuals, wheelchair users, but I'd say at every single event, there's always a couple of, individuals, whether they're, like yourself, an assistive tech or O&M, people who help other blind individuals, right? So yes and no. So I would definitely be willing, to figure that out with you and others in the area, because especially, in a place where they would be able to show um, the users, if you will, how to use it at that space. So if it's, I think if it makes sense in a venue where there's people that can train people there. If I hope that sentence made sense,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
if it's in the local area to where, say one day we do launch Bradley Airport or whatever, or not Bradley, Logan.
Logan. Yeah.
If we do launch Logan one day, and there's obviously a mass group there that can come train, so because not everybody can make it to a 2 to 4 hour event when I'm there, and I know that, but being able to have everybody gather, I think would be an awesome, opportunity. We could even do that, depending on where people are in the state at Perkins or at, one of the other locations in the area. So Providence, Bradley. So yeah, I would definitely, want to look into how to do that and make sure that we can get everybody on board and whether it's only for a few hours or whatnot, I think that we could at least get you all versed enough. It's not, I would say it takes 2 to 3 routes for someone who's never used it before. So I think once you all, got an hour with it and just tried it out for a little bit, you would be able to share it with as many people as possible. So I would definitely look into doing that with you all.
Excellent. Okay, I think Jennifer raised her hand.
Yes, thanks very much. This is a really good conversation. And Logan's actually a great example of a question I had really about whether you're about making sure that you're coordinating with the people who could make something like this happen. I mean, back about, I want to say a couple months ago, there was a really good presentation by Jill Suarez, the mobility instructor from Mass Commission. And it so happens that a couple of years ago, she has a contact at Logan who did, and they worked with me when I wanted to come and learn a little bit about the layout of a terminal before I took a trip.
Mhm.
And so, that kind of, since then, I've been able to use IRA independently at an airport. And good maps would probably enhance that even further, through a combination. I think it's good to have all those tools. I used IRA,
Definitely, definitely.
also I did get a little bit of human help, but it was exactly when and what I needed when I needed it, and it was just so smooth to be able to have all those options. So, what's the best way to kind of coordinate all these contacts and make sure these buildings get mapped?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it depends on the building. What I'll use, just because we're on the airport topic, I'll use that as an example. Half of our airport, points of contacts for our partnerships are operations, like VP of operations, or we have a couple that are government affairs. We have a couple that are, the true customer experience side of things, and maybe two or three that are on the accessibility side of things. That is not ideal for any situation for venues, but unfortunately, as probably a lot of us know on this call, they don't give a lot of power to the people who we need to talk to for the accessibility and disability services. They, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, are not the prime decision maker. So I will talk to them and then they'll send me up to somebody else. Now, that being said, there's, for instance, Salt Lake City Airport. It's obviously a large hub. The person we're going through right now is a head of accessibility, and he's great. And I make sure to go to as many of the conversations at these conferences as I can that make sense for us. Where there's an inclusion in aviation conference every year. It is unfortunately the smallest airport conference I go to. And so for the venues themselves, it depends. I would focus heavily on customer experience because 90% of the time they're covering the accessibility side of things too. And in reality, we are a customer of whatever venue as well. And so it's helped us a lot when we've gone from just, navigating the blind to the accuracy improving and navigating everyone with the web maps as well. I know Memphis Airport, for instance, we launched with them a couple of months ago. They, of course, loved, the accessibility side, but if I had to guess, that's not the reason they signed with us. The reason they signed with us is because they have a 5-year, construction plan that we can edit their maps in real time for them. So unfortunately, that still helps us because it's still accessible now. But unfortunately, it depends on the venue we're talking to on how to approach the conversation, if that makes sense. And I hate that, but it's the world we live in these days. And I've kind of had to navigate after 5 minutes of talking to somebody, know what their priorities are. And to be honest, it doesn't matter to me if they're more interested into the construction or the accessibility, because if we can get in, then we're making that airport accessible or that building. So it's tough sometimes trying to know if that person truly cares that we're making it accessible or if they just want to have a better map. So yeah, it's a tricky question, but I would shoot for customer experience first in most venues, if that helps.
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
I downloaded the app and was able to access it. There's no cost to the user?
Correct. Yeah, so it's free for all users. And we just a quick note on that. I got told yesterday that we hit 1.1 million users in the last 12 months, and that's from the web map and the application. So it's free for all of those users. And the way that we do that is partnering with those venues and have them on a support / licensing fee over the next normally 3-year contract. So we
I think
want to make
that's
sure that anybody
fantastic.
can use it. Yes, sir.
That is absolutely fantastic and so user friendly.
Yes, and if it wasn't like that, I would have problems. I would raise some fits with the team for sure. Our goal is to never charge the user, especially with the way that we are going about this with the buildings and properties. I think it would be different if we're able to somehow navigate people wherever they were. If you're standing in a random park we don't have mapped out, and you could just navigate using the accuracy. Of course, there's outdoor applications that I use every once in a while. We used to have one, and now it is Indigo. I went from Good Maps Outdoors to Indigo, but we, those GPS are helpful, but until we were doing something other than what we're doing, we're not going to be charging any of our users.
How much does it cost for, say, a public library of a normal city size to sign up for or to register as a user or as a supporting facility with Good Maps?
Yeah, so it would depend on two things. One, if they're able to do that scan and go, or if we're coming out to scan it. And the other is I could guess off the top of my head, off size, but we'll say our cheapest that we can go, just because of keeping everything on the server and mapping, would be roughly 2,500 to 3,000 upfront for the mapping, the cost of creation of the drawings, all that good stuff, and then roughly $1,200 to $1,500 a year, or $100 a month for our smallest, and that's basically the cheapest we can go on the actual mapping. One thing, I had, for instance, I had an airport yesterday that had reached out to me asking about pricing, or I reached out to them to set up a call, and he said, I need to know the price before we can even talk. And the problem is, before, I can talk to somebody and they know a price, they don't know what that covers. So being able to say, hey, this gives you the opportunity to edit every single part of your map. This gives you support from our team for the whole contract. It gives you a launch event for, however much money for the travel. All these different things, plus the accessibility at the base. Being able to say we're the accessible platform, plus you get all these other features for the facilities, it kind of, because a lot of people are charging just for LiDAR scans. So the costs have been, very good compared to the competitors from what I've witnessed.
Yeah, one of your competitors right here, that's pretty similar.
Yeah.
Right here they put up GPS stickers around the place.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yours is just GPS.
Yeah, so
marked, right?
yeah, no GPS, no stickers, QR codes, beacons, no. So the library itself, for instance, would do nothing unless they were scanning the public space for us. They wouldn't install a single thing, so we wouldn't touch the walls, the infrastructure, anything like that. So what we do is, so there's a LiDAR scanner about the size of a Stanley thermos, and if it's not being used by that iPhone Pro for the scanning, we would have someone on site scan it within a handful of hours. That's mainly just the public space, unless we wanted to do more. And then it's virtually just walking. They hold it one hand on top of the other, and it's doing a 360-degree scan with very micro frames. And those micro frames is what's kind of creating the geometry and point cloud for our phones to recognize what it's looking at, if that makes sense. So it's comparing what it sees. But yeah, zero installation. That's what sets us apart. The accuracy, plus the no installation, and the fact that we're accessible for really anyone that can hold a phone, and not just blind or low vision, or not just the general public, things like that. So there's for instance, there's about 3 or 4 large mapping companies for airports, and none of them have accessible directions or navigation. They might be accessible for a screen reader on their website, but the map isn't accessible and the directions aren't. So our goal is to bridge the gap from just being accessible to being an overall great platform and accessible for as many people as possible.